First of all, the bright, clear colour of the sky and all it holds within it, the stars that wander here and there, and the moon and the radiance of the sun with its brilliant light. All these, if now they were in a moment placed before their eyes, what story could be told more marvellous than these things? Or what that the nations would less dare to believe beforehand? Yet think how no one now, wearied with satiety of seeing, deigns to gaze up at the shining quarters of the sky. So there's some words that were written at least a couple of thousand years ago by a Roman philosopher, Lucretius. At least I think that's how you pronounce his name. And I wanted to start with those because Lucretius, 2,000 or however many years ago, was bemoaning the fact that people had lost their sense of wonder. There were these heavens unfolding, opening up night after night. There was the sun lighting up the world day after day. What a magnificent panorama that we live under. And he was saying, but nobody deigns to gaze in wonder at the sky. If that was true then, it's definitely true today, now, particularly, I think, in London. If I was living in the countryside, or when I've lived in the countryside a little bit on retreat or something, it's a bit different. Maybe it's a bit different for you here. Tonight, apparently, all the planets of our solar system are going to be visible all at once. Yeah, all at once. And some of them, apparently, you can see with the naked eye. I don't really know where to look, actually, so apart from sort of up. But what I want to talk about is this sense of wonder and how important this sense of wonder is if we're going to move towards enlightenment. And it's enlightenment that I want to talk about. This sense of wonder is intrinsic to the quest, to the spiritual quest. And I think it's sort of intrinsic to a meaningful human life. I think children have it, so it must be sort of innate. Kids have it. Somewhere along the line, I mean, I've got a 2-year-old great-nephew, and he definitely has it. You only have to show him a picture of a fish, not even a live fish. And he's like, oh, fish! Fish! It's delightful. It's completely delightful. If you take him to an aquarium, he's beside himself. At some point you lose that, we lose that. And fair enough, you can't go around, in that sort of state of the 2-year-old. But somewhere around adolescence, maybe, everything becomes dull, doesn't it? Everything is just tedious. We're all too cool for school, and life is just boring. And some of us never get out of that. Not maybe from that adolescent state, maybe that's a bit unfair. But what happens, I think, for many of us is life becomes complicated and we get swallowed up in the utilitarian business of living, which is pretty dull, but demanding. Yeah, and then who looks up at the sky in wonder? Who really wonders about what it is to be alive, to be conscious, to be human? Einstein said the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all sciences. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. I'm going to read that again. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science. She to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. Her eyes are closed. I think often, and I'm sort of embarrassed to admit, my eyes are often closed. I think our eyes are often closed. I could, as a Buddhist, stand up here and say, yep, wonder is part of my life. But I forget, I'm afraid, and MasterChef Professionals becomes part of my life. Netflix becomes part of my life. Entertaining it is. Wonder is not one of the emotions awe is not one of the emotions that perfect, panna cotta, it doesn't do that, does it? So I think we all, part of what I'm doing is trying to remind myself as well why I am practicing the Dharma, why I was first drawn to practice the Dharma, what attracted me to the Dharma. I need to keep remembering and reminding myself, because life, the mundane business of living, takes over my life as well, in too many ways. So I'll come back to this sense of wonder, but I wanted to start with it because in this talk, in trying to evoke Vairochana, the Buddha Vairochana, this archetypal figure, this symbol of enlightenment at the center of the mandala of the five jhanas, in trying to evoke him and in trying to talk about what he represents, it would be better to start with wonder and to end with wonder, and in the middle, not worry if you don't understand. This sense of mysterious is the most important thing, said Einstein. In Buddhism, right from the off, it's assumed that we will not understand what the Buddha was teaching. Not when it comes to enlightenment. We will not understand. It goes beyond reason. Concepts can take us so far, and then enlightenment goes beyond it. That's why we have images, because images can sometimes speak to us poetically in a way that reason can't. That does not mean that we can't use our reason. In fact, we must use our reason. Buddhism says you don't abandon your reason. Don't become gullible. Don't become some sort of fanatic, religious fanatic that doesn't think for themselves. Reason is vital. We use it as much and as far as we can take it, as much as we can, for as far as we can take it, knowing that it is limited. And then we have to go beyond it. In this talk, I'm going to try and use concepts and reason, but I hope that I'll point to something that goes beyond them. And if you can't follow it, that's part of the plan. Yeah? That lets me off the hook, doesn't it? So what I want to say is that I think it's important, if you want to practice the Dharma, it's important to learn to reflect on existential questions. If you've come to meditation in order to really, relax and de-stress and reset your year and so forth, they're all respectable reasons to practice meditation. But I have to say, that wasn't why the Buddha practiced meditation. He wasn't bothered about resetting his year. I don't think he ever would have used those words or thought in those terms. That's not why he embarked on this quest of leaving his home and comfort and enduring all the hardships and meditating day and night in the forest on his own and then in the company of others and being prepared to die under the Bodhi tree unless he gained enlightenment. That wasn't why he did it. It wasn't about a reset. It was because he was bothered about the existential questions of what it is to be human, what it is to be alive, what do we do with our lives given that we are going to die, what is it to be mortal, what is death, why do we suffer, and who are we really? I mean, what is it, who we really are? Those were the questions that preoccupied the young Siddhartha Gautama before he embarked on his quest. Those were the questions that he sought an answer to, and those are the questions that enlightenment addresses. In answering is the wrong word, in addressing those questions, in finding a realization that made sense of those questions, the Buddha found that there was a possibility of a new type of consciousness that all human beings are potentially capable of realizing, a new type of consciousness which is completely fulfilled, where there is such fulfillment that there is no yearning, no hankering for anything external beyond this consciousness, that you can dwell in peace, in freedom, in bliss, with meaning, with love, with a sense of complete transcendence of separation. And it somehow addresses the question of death, so that even dying, even the death of the body, doesn't shake this new type of consciousness. So that is then very, very mysterious. And then he spent 45 years after enlightenment teaching others how to do that. And many, many people realized what he had realized. And from his perspective, everything else that we do in our lives, all the goals that we have for ourselves and maybe our loved ones, all of those pale in comparison to this new type of consciousness that we're capable of. From his perspective, we're not living our potential by a long, long way. I mean, that puts it in a trivial way. From his perspective, we are sort of, I don't know, sort of like little, I don't know, animals wandering around in the mud, not really knowing that they could look up at the sky at all, not knowing that there is a sky to look up to. But we're not going to get a glimpse, and it is possible to get a glimpse of enlightenment. I'm not enlightened myself, but I have sufficient experience of the Dharma to know that it's possible to get sufficient glimpses of enlightenment that will transform you, that will transform your perspective on life, will transform everything that you think life is about. It will transform it, it'll also turn it on its head. It's not a quest for the faint-hearted. If you think that Buddhism is for somehow an easy path of rest and relaxation and maybe self-indulgent navel-gazing, you're in for a rude shock, because it's not. It's going to be the Buddha said, it's the most demanding thing that a human being can do is to reach enlightenment. It will mean turning on its head every assumption that we've got about who we are, what life is. And yet, in doing so, if we have the courage to do so, there's the potential for a realization which is so liberating, so blissful, so fulfilling, as to make everything else seem trivial. Vairochana sits at the center of this mandala, this image that Mahayana Buddhism, later Buddhism, emerged in later Buddhism. These figures are, from one perspective, you could think of them as aspects of the enlightened mind. They're not as they're depicted. I mean, these beautiful images on the shrine are just trying to be doorways to something that is far, far more radiant and beautiful than we can really depict. These figures in meditation, they're said to emerge as made of light, they're translucent, and they're full of the qualities of enlightenment. And if we meditate upon them, you can do systematic meditation practices upon these figures. They can act as doorways to enlightenment itself. They're paths, doorways, windows onto the enlightenment experience. So they're very, very potent. You could say they're magic in a certain sense. Vairochana sits at the center of the mandala. So he is, in a way, at the heart of this image. It's like all the other Buddhas, the four Buddhas at the cardinal points. There was Akshobhya, then Ratnasambhava, then Amitabha, then Amodasiddhi, all refracting aspects of the enlightened experience. And then Vairochana combines everything. In him, they all meet. They all meet, and they're taken further in a way that maybe I'll try and point to. He's called the primeval Buddha. He's like the symbol, the archetype of Buddhahood, even before it was ever realized as by the Buddha. It's like Buddhahood, enlightenment as a potential in the cosmos that is beyond time and space. He's an embodiment of that, a figure that represents that potential. Not just the potential, but enlightenment as a force in the universe. He's radiant white. He's white because white contains all the other colours. So all the other Buddhas are, as it were, colours refracted from him. On his crown, he wears a crown. There are jewels, the colours of the other Buddhas, and a white one in the centre. It's as if the other Buddhas are adorning him on the crown of his head. He's associated with space. I've entitled my talk Lost in Space, which might make sense later on, searching for Vairochana, lost in space. He's associated with this element of space, infinite, boundless space. And in his hands, at his heart, he holds a golden wheel. And I'll come back to that. That's his mudra and his implement. He sits in sort of meditation posture, holding this golden wheel. Not just holding it, actually, but turning it. It moves. And I called my talk Lost in Space, partly, it was a little private joke, but I'm going to share it. Well, most of you aren't old enough to remember Lost in Space on the television, are you? No, most of you are not. Oh, one or two, three, thank you. In the 60s, and David Mitra's probably too old, are you? Forgive me, David Mitra, that was a little jibe. In the 60s, late 60s, there was this science fiction, lo-fi kind of black and white television program of a family called the Robinsons who get lost in space. And I was an avid little toddler, avid fan of Lost in... All I can remember of it, really, I had to look it up on Wikipedia because I can't remember anything of it, apart from I really loved it. And I think over the credits at the start, it would say something like, "Lost in Space!" So that's what I remember. I don't remember those words. Anyway, maybe I'll come back to that, and maybe it'll make a bit more sense why that sort of makes sense to me anyway. So these existential questions, now they may not be burning for you all the time, or maybe any of the time. That's okay. If you practice Buddhism, part of the practice is learning to reflect on existential matters and trying to make those matters have more import in your life. Actually, for every one of us, we will have been touched at some point by, suffering, for example. And that's an existential question. Many of us will have experienced bereavement. That's an existential question. But often, we don't know how to reflect. We don't often know how to reflect. And I think that's a real shame. I've seen people who they've been bereaved and they've been distressed, or they've found out that they've got a serious illness and they're really upset. But all their energy goes into trying to make it all right again. They don't reflect on what does this say about the human condition? What does this say about what's important in life? What we should be living for? Buddhist practice helps you reflect on these questions, but you have to be prepared to make an effort to do that. For me, it's why I came to Buddhism. When I was little, my dad died, but even before that, I was curious. I wanted to know, why do we exist? And what am I meant to do with life? Why am I here? No adults seem to take me very seriously or answer those questions. I came across a little school project probably as a 9-year-old called What is Life? And I'd written little, poems and prose pieces and things about. I tracked a whole journey of a man who lived from 0 to 100, and I tracked each couple of decades or something from childhood to youth, and asked things like, "What are we doing here?" And the teachers just gave me like a tick. I got a tick. I was existentially challenged as a kid, and for me. That's why I've come to Buddhism. I didn't really just want a reset. My life was all right, actually, by the time I came to Buddhism. I'd sort of made something of my life that worked, but it wasn't enough. As Sturmanis was saying, sometimes you just know that there's more, and you need to find that more. It's not enough, the mundane stuff. I went on to study physics at university because I thought, physics has something to say about the nature of reality. It will maybe answer my questions about what's going on, time and space and all of that, matter, And it didn't. It didn't answer any of those questions really. It didn't give me satisfaction. But what it did do, and I'm grateful for this, is it completely convinced me, if I needed convincing, that common sense perception does not reveal the truth about what's going on. Common sense perception is a delusion. It's a delusion that helps us survive as an organism and get by and make our breakfast and so forth. But if you want to understand or realize what the nature of reality is, common sense perception is a lie. Einstein said that common sense was nothing more than a set of prejudices that were laid down in somebody by the time they reached adulthood. It's a set of prejudices. And Buddhism says we've got something very wrong. When we believe our common sense perceptions, that's our sense experience, our 5 physical senses and our ordinary mind, when we believe that that is telling us how things are, we are not only very wrong, but we're on a path leading to more pain. That's why this is important. It's not just that these existential questions are philosophically titillating for some people, like myself, and wouldn't it be great to just sort of sit around and ponder the meaning of life while, having lots of chocolate and ice cream and whatever. I do that, actually. But the point is that on the other side of these questions is something extraordinarily precious, extraordinarily fulfilling. And if we're not moving towards that, we're likely to at best be getting by, at worst causing more suffering for ourselves and other people. Yeah? So let me just talk a little bit about what Buddhism has to say about mind. But as I start talking now, a disclaimer is that when Buddhism doesn't actually tell you in conceptual terms what the nature of reality is, or it doesn't answer these questions in conceptual terms. What it does is it opens up a mystery that you can experience for yourself, and the realization that you can have for yourself will go beyond conceptual terms. It does do something that's transformative, but it won't be able to be put into words. Nevertheless, Buddhism tries to use concepts as a pointer. It says, look, it's something a bit like this, but all the concepts need to be seen as pointers and as metaphors. If we take them literally, then we're back onto that deluded path. So when I try and explain what Buddhism has to say about world consciousness, I'm now going to stray into metaphors and models that might be helpful and suggestive, but they're not how things really are. Yeah? So according to this model, mind, and I'm going to use the word mind rather than consciousness, and I'm not going to try and define mind. According to this model from later Buddhism, it's from the Yogacara school of Buddhism, mind has, as it were, three turnings or three manifestations or three levels to it. At the topmost level, the most superficial level, we've got our sense experience from our 5 physical senses. That's part of this first level of mind. And then we've got our ordinary consciousness with its thoughts, images, impulses, emotions, etc. So we've got sensations from our 5 physical senses, sight, sound, smell, etc. And then we've got our ordinary mind. We've got those 6 kind of ways of perceiving, and all of that is the first, most superficial level. And Buddhism says that actually at that level, there's nothing yet gone wrong. We're not deluded at that level. Like this morning, I was meditating and really enjoying birdsong. It was so beautiful just to be, it's so still in here, and there was just birdsong. To enjoy birdsong is not deluded. It's not a problem. Yeah, Buddhism's saying that's completely fine. But the next level of mind is where the problem begins, the delusion begins. And what that level of mind does is it makes an assumption, a very deep-seated assumption. It's below the level of conscious kind of thinking. It's an assumption that I'm in here, there's a real me, and it's bounded by this skin of this body, and somewhere in here there's a fixed being, separate being and fixed being that I call me, and then there's a world out there that is separate from me. And it includes other people, other beings, but they're all out there and I'm in here. So, for example, the bird song at this deluded level is definitely out there, and I'm enjoying it and hearing it in here. But the bird is outside, and the sound is outside, and I'm hearing it. But when you actually look more forensically at the experience of hearing bird song, what's happening, it's more mysterious than that. What is sound? Where is sound actually happening? Is it happening out there? But surely we need ears. If without our hearing working properly, we wouldn't be able to hear sound. Sound isn't just a thing out there. We need our sense apparatus. I mean, my ears are huge, aren't they? But I'm still losing them. I'm losing my hearing, I think. What an irony, eh? Anyway, let's not dwell on that. Where is the sound happening? It's an experience sound. You need your ears and your hearing, but you also need to be conscious. If you were asleep, you wouldn't hear it. Stiramanis this morning was not conscious when the alarm went off. And he has one of these alarms that goes louder and louder and louder, and he was completely out of it. I had to get up, turn off his alarm, sort of say, Stiramanis, Stiramanis. Nothing. I turn on the light, Stiramanis, nothing. Momentarily it occurred to me that he might have died. I didn't want to touch him, so I just thought, maybe you're dead. And then I thought, I need the loo. If he's died, he'll wait. So I then went to the loo. Anyway, he's fine. It's all fine. Do you see, if your mind isn't conscious, then sound doesn't happen for you. Does that make sense? So experience is mysterious. You can't just say it's out there, nor can you say it's entirely in here, because I'm not making up the bird song. There is something a little bit more objective, but it's not completely objective. There is a little bit more something internal, but it's not completely made up either. Sight is like that. You're looking at me now, and I'm looking at you. Let's just focus on me. So you're looking at me, but what you're actually experiencing is an image in your mind. Is that right? Yeah? You're experiencing an image in your mind. Does that make sense? I'm not going to elaborate. You know this. But what this deluded mind does, this next level, is instead of realizing that, it just says, oh, he's out there. And that image is a real being out there, separate from me. But actually, I'm in your mind. My words are in your mind. And the image that you've got is happening somewhere in your mind. That's mysterious, isn't it? What is out there then? What is separate from us? What would it look like if we could really see what was out there? Well, I don't know. Because colour is happening in your mind. Colours don't exist just objectively. So Buddhism has this analysis that says, look, experience is deeply mysterious, but common sense assumptions just say, oh no, there's a world out there that's true, just like I experience it. And there's a me in here that is doing all the experiencing quite passively. That's the second level of mind. That's where the problem is. That's where unenlightenment is. And that's where, in a way, common sense is. So what we do is we just go about our common sense business, trying to manipulate the world out there to suit us, pushing away anything that threatens us, grabbing towards, trying to anyway, ourselves anything that we want, and not knowing that all of that is not how reality really works. And then we suffer. Now, all of that would still not be worth worrying about if it ended there. But what's fascinating is that Buddhism's saying there's a deeper level of mind still. There's a deeper level of mind. If you could experience it, this deepest level of mind is radiant. It's completely pristine. It's full of light. And it doesn't seem to divide the world into an in here and an out there. It's pure awareness. It's vast in that it feels boundless and boundarylessness. So when you for example, when you meditate, there's a sense of space in your minds. Sometimes that space is bigger, sometimes it's smaller and more contracted. Do you get that? Do you get a sense of spaciousness? Sometimes? Well, that spaciousness of the mind can extend till it's infinite, till it's completely without bounds, and it's completely without a center. It's not centered on a sense of self. And that spaciousness, if you can go into it, let go into it, is full of bliss, and it's full of love. It's when we do the metta bhavana, we think, oh, I'm trying to generate metta, but this spaciousness already has it. It is alive with love, with bliss, with freedom, with creativity, with, well, all that we can talk about is beauty. Of course, beauty is a metaphor here. It's full of the enlightened mind's qualities, and it's the deepest level of our own mind that we don't get to because we stay at that common sense level. Do you see? That is what Vairochana is a representation of, that pure awareness, that pure mind, that when you taste it, you can no longer say it's mine, because boundaries and concepts like me have fallen away. In order to get there, you've had to let go of any sense of me. I've had to let go of any sense of me. You can't say it's other than me, because we've also let go of a sense of outside of me. We've let go of me and world, inside and outside, all sense of separation. So this level of mind, this enlightened mind, you could say, is uncategorizable. You can't say it's personal, you can't say it's not personal. It's transcendent. And it is not in common sense space or common sense time. Like when you meditate, if you get a sense of spaciousness, that's not happening in this three-dimensional space of the shrine room. That's a sort of internal spaciousness. Do you see? So this vastness, this vast, boundaryless, boundless, blissful, free, creative love is not in this material world of time and space or matter. It's almost the other way round. What Buddhism says is that when you experience it, you realize that this cosmos of, as it were, external space and time and matter is in it. And we, this body and my ordinary mind, is in it, rather than it being in us. It turns everything upside down. It's almost impossible to talk about. So all of Buddhist practice is saying you can realize this because it is our innate potential, all of us. And when we realize it, there will be a complete freedom. And the death of the body will mean nothing very much, because all the death of the body is the death of this material form, or the returning of the elements that compose this material form back into the elements of the world. But this mind is beyond that. So all of Buddhist practice is leading to that. And Danyuta in the first half of the retreat was talking about the threefold path. I'm just going to illustrate it briefly. The threefold path is Sila, Samadhi, Prajna, sometimes translated as ethics, meditation, and wisdom. So I'm going to use that as an example of the whole of the Buddhist path. There's lots of formulations. This one's an easy one, simple one. So with our ethical practice, what we're trying to do is become less self-centered, more generous, more kind, more truthful, less self-preoccupied and less self-centered in our actions in the world. Yeah? And that starts to loosen this common sense assumption that I'm a separate agent and being. We start to, by becoming less self-centered ethically, we start to feel more the truth of our relational relatedness. We start to see that other people are like ourselves, that relationships matter, that we affect other people, positively or otherwise. And that starts to loosen this tight clinging to a me in here and a world out there. Because relationships, communications start to break through that. So ethics does that. So we practice deliberately generosity, kindness, contentment, etc. That doesn't take us deep enough, though, because there are still self-centered, emotional and volitional mental states. So I still feel self-centered. I still feel greedy, lazy, irritated, angry, jealous. All sorts of self-centered states still are present in my mind, and no matter how kindly I act or generously I act, sometimes they don't seem to be that much affected. Meditation is a way of really transforming those states of mind. Doing the Metabhavana, doing it every day or every other day for years, you will start to transform, actually not even years, weeks, and or even this retreat, you'll start to transform your state of mind. So meditation, coupled with ethics, has a more powerful effect. One without the other doesn't go far enough. But still those two don't go far enough, because this root delusion, this fundamental delusion that I'm a separate being in here, and you're a separate being out there, and the world is out there, and the bird song is out there, etc., that still remains untouched by ordinary meditation. It takes wisdom practices to uproot that delusion. And so the last stage is you practice wisdom. And that involves reflection in the way that I'm encouraging us to do. You have to look at your experience with these lenses of what's really going on. And then sometimes if you've tried to live ethically, if you've worked on creating a pliable, still mind that's pretty positive, emotionally open and positive and malleable and in relationship with people and empathic and loving, and then you reflect, sometimes it's like I was going to say the penny drops, but that's too trivial. It's like there's a depth charge. Something, suddenly, a realization happens, an insight happens. It's like a flash of lightning, and you suddenly see this deepest level of mind. Now, even if you see it, it's likely to disappear. But what that flash does is convince you that it's real. And then you have to keep practicing and working on transforming yourself more, and then more flashes will occur. One day, it's said, the flashes stop being flashes and they just become radiant light and illuminated light. The closest image that we've got to that is the sun. Vairochana is a solar symbol. He's called the illuminator. It is this radiant nature of mind that the Buddhist path leads to. And you can get intimations of it. You can get intimations of it even when, well before those flashes. When you go out into the grounds after a good meditation, you've been relatively concentrated, and you look at a tree, and you see those twigs and branches, or you look at the shrine, and it suddenly seems ethereally beautiful. Those moments of beauty are truer than our common sense assumptions. That's why this sense of wonder is so important. Beauty is so important. We're more in touch with reality when we're sort of caught by beauty. For a while, our silly, self-centered worrying about me stops. There's just wrapped beauty. Yeah? So beauty is a way in. Love is another way in. Love, if you could love without just getting all that love hooked onto that one person, it would be fine. It's when it gets hooked onto that one person that then what happens is, oh, I want that person to love me back, and it all still becomes about me. Yeah? Otherwise, love is fine. It's a path. Okay, I'm going to move on. I've got a little bit more to say. So all of practice is leading to that. I want to come back to an image that is to do with Vairochana. It's from a sutra, a later Mahayana sutra called the Gandavya Sutra, which itself is part of a much larger sutra called the Avatamsaka Sutra, a huge kind of weighty work, and which I've not read. But the Avatamsaka Sutra is very influential in some schools of Buddhism. And the Gandavya Sutra, which is a chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra, is a sort of, it stands alone. And it tells the mythical story of a spiritual pilgrim called Sudana, who wants to understand the truth. He wants to gain enlightenment. And he goes from teacher to teacher. He's sent by Manjushri, another archetypal figure, from teacher to teacher to get teachings. And some of these teachers are seemingly ordinary folk, a prostitute, a beggar. He has teachings from them. I think he has about 53 encounters, learning from each one. Towards the end, the climax, as it were, of the sutra, he meets the Buddha to come, Maitreya, the future Buddha, who leads him to a huge tower, an enormous tower, that is called the Tower of the Adornments of Vairochana. The Tower of the Adornments of Vairochana. And what Sudana does is he prostrates himself before the tower. He worships the tower. He prostrates himself before Maitreya, the future Buddha. And then Maitreya lets him in. It's interesting, isn't it? You have to be receptive for the door to be unlocked, the door to enlightenment to be unlocked. He goes in, and what does he find? He finds that inside the tower is infinite space. It's like there's still the walls of the tower, and yet it's an infinitely vast space. It's like well, this is 2.5, well, probably 2,000 years old. It's like the TARDIS, Doctor Who's TARDIS. He goes inside the tower, and it's vast, and it's adorned with all the jewels and lights and banners and canopies and garlands and music and incense and just these, and also beautiful beings. It's adorned with complete beauty. But more than that, there are an infinite number of towers within the tower, and they're all spaced out so that no one tower interrupts or interferes with or impedes on another, so they're all spaced out. And inside each of those towers is an infinite space with an infinite number of towers, just like that one. What an incredible image. And Sudana realizes the truth. He gains enlightenment at that point. He realizes the truth. So this image is an image for how things really are that is very different from our common sense worldview. I don't know what that means, that image, but I'm going to try and just kind of give you a pointer and myself a pointer. So I was saying that if you realize the deepest level of mind, of your mind, it will be vast, it will be boundless, it will be infinite, and it will feel as if this cosmos of space and time and matter is within it. But then if the person next to you also realizes the nature of mind, their experience will be vast, and it will be like the whole cosmos is in there. And if we all did that, we would all have this vast mind or experience of mind with the whole cosmos inside it. And maybe that would be like towers of infinite space within towers of infinite space, each containing each reflected in each, the cosmos, the whole thing being in each. Does that make sense? I don't know if it makes sense. I find it beautiful. I find it thrilling. It's what I want to bow down to. It is what I bow down to when I bow down to the shrine. I haven't realized that, but I know that common sense reality is not real. if I could tell you about quantum physics and relativity, I haven't got time, and I don't understand those either. But scientists tell you that space and time, as we think of them, are not real. The Nobel Prize for Physics this year was won by 3 physicists, 3 men who did some experiments years ago, showing that reality is not as it appears to be. It's neither completely objective and out there, independent of our perception, nor is it really separate, nor are things really separate in it, or at least some combination of the two. Okay, so lastly, well, for me, this vision is worth trying to live for. But lastly, Vairochana is holding in his hands, turning this golden wheel. That is the wheel of the Dharma. He's turning the wheel of the Dharma, i.e. he's teaching us the Dharma. And what does that mean? That sort of somehow suggests to me that reality, as it really is always trying to teach us the Dharma. It's reaching down to us, trying to wake us up out of our slumber. Just as I was trying to wake Sthiramanas up this morning, it's saying, wake up! There is more. There is more. Everything is teaching us the Dharma. But most of the time, we ignore that. We want to stay in our comfortable world of common sense space, common sense time, and common sense me in here and world out there. And then we turn Netflix on and hope that we'll be happy, and hope that life won't hurt us too much, and hope we'll get through, and the interest rates don't rise too much on our mortgage repayments. It's tragic when reality is always trying to wake us up. So on this retreat, in the days that we've got left, we've got an opportunity to listen, to really listen to the sound of reality trying to wake us up, to the voice of Vairochana who's speaking to us all the time. It's not that reality is just some abstract concept, it's alive, and somehow we are part of it. Somehow we're co-creating it, and somehow it's always trying to wake us up to enlightenment. Let's try and do that.